Hello and welcome to another empowering episode of Empowered Ease. I'm Jen Olinger, your host and fellow journeywoman through the complexities of midlife as a woman. I bring you weekly conversations every Monday with women who are making a difference, professionals, caregivers, and change makers. Together, we explore how to listen to our bodies, build our tribe, and do health our way. So tune in and let's challenge the norms, embrace our strength and our wisdom together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Empowered Ease. If you're a highly sensitive woman who's been battling the bathroom scales and feeling frustrated with traditional weight loss methods, then this episode may be for you. I'm delighted to introduce Ellouise Heather. She's a holistic weight loss expert with a decade of experience supporting highly sensitive women. Ellouise helps them peacefully release excess weight without having to hate or punish their bodies so that they can finally love the woman smiling back in the mirror. Ellouise, welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to Empowered Ease. So just wanted to give you guys a little heads up. If you have been listening and noticed I haven't been putting out as many episodes, in this summer I've been just doing an episode every other week to give myself a little break over the summer. But I'm so excited to announce our guests today. So welcome, Ellouise. I'm so excited to talk to you and about your unique approach to this and how you help women. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you. So where do I start? I live in the northeast of England in a little village. I have the most adorable little dog, and she is just a shining example of breaking all the rules of what it is to grow older. She's technically a senior dog, but she is full of life,
Aw.
and she's a little bit of an inspiration. I think we find coaching from our animals on a regular basis. I think that's something that tends to happen when you're highly sensitive, and I do identify as highly sensitive, which is what has led me to this path.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so first of all, you sound like you are in like the intro or the main character in a romantic comedy with your cute little your beautiful accent and your cute like I live in a little village. It's like so cute. It's Love Actually here. Okay. But I love it. So when you say highly sensitive women, what do you mean by that? What's a highly sensitive woman or how could women identify that, hey, maybe that's me?
Okay, so highly sensitive people, they take up about 20 to 25% of the population. I think the original figure was about 15 to 20%, but it does fluctuate with estimations. And this group of people, basically how it sounds, they feel things more intensely, more deeply, and that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It just is. And so, what tends to be the experience for these highly sensitive people is that the world can overwhelm them, it can overstimulate them if they don't understand how being highly sensitive affects them, and if indeed that they are highly sensitive, and therefore they're not going to be aware of how to manage that. And that subcategory, highly sensitive women, uh, it's a slightly more nuanced because when you're a highly sensitive woman, there are certain roles that are bestowed upon you when you're younger and expectations. And the landscape is shifting a little bit now, which is fantastic. But there are certain expectations put on you as a child for, both, little girls, little boys, and um, expectations of who we should be, the genders that we should actually grow into. And that's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really, really difficult for highly sensitive people because all the all of our brains are wired to survive. And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't seek that survival by making sure our needs are met, then we risk being neglected. So this is why the human brain seeks
Mm-hmm.
um, surviving survival ensuring behaviors. And the way that we do that is we just do everything that we're told, or we try to do everything that we're told, and that's on the surface. But then underneath, when you're highly sensitive, you're also picking up on all these subtle nuances that are going on under the surface that other people might not detect. And so it's not always about what you're being told to do, it's about things that go unspoken, unspoken expectations, unspoken rules, and we pick up on those. And because all we want to do is to make sure that the status quo is okay and that we're not rocking the boat, we often feel how other people are feeling.
I was going to
So
ask you, so I hear a lot of people talking about like I'm empath and like, is that is for people who identify as like an empath, is that the same as identifying as like a sensitive woman, or are those things different? Because I feel like empaths are people who say they're always like sensitive to the emotions of others in the room, like they're highly tuned in to other
mhm.
people's emotions. And I've heard a couple things about where that comes from. One said that could be from like childhood trauma. It teaches you to be aware of everyone's emotions because it's a survival mechanism. So is that the same, or is there some differences there?
There's certainly an overlap.
Okay.
So in order to be an empath, you would need to be, well, need to be, you'd expect to be a highly sensitive person,
Hmm.
but you don't have to be an empath if you are a highly sensitive person. So it's
I
like
hear
an
you.
empath is
Okay.
like a
A subset.
subcategory.
Okay.
Yes. So you can still pick up on what's going on for other people in terms of their emotional state by being highly sensitive, because you can pick up on like micro, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Micro
Like shifts in
gestures.
people's mood, or are you
Yes.
looking? Okay.
So you can pick up on shifts in people's mood, but also it's like micro gestures and body language and this
Oh,
kind of thing
okay.
that other people don't tend to pick up on, tone of voice. So these are all things that, can be picked up from the highly sensitive point of view. But then as an empath, you can also get a sense of like a real strong sense of what the other person's feeling, and then you can actually take that on as your own. And that is particularly typical if you want to please the people around you because there's some kind of difficulty there, or because you don't feel safe. So you've got perhaps some self-esteem issues that are going on, which in my opinion, more likely to happen if you're highly sensitive, because you get told that you're wrong, you're too sensitive, and that these things that you're picking up on aren't real, or that kind of thing. Thankfully, that's actually changing now, because people are starting to understand the existence of what it is to be a highly sensitive person. And we've also got like a rising of awareness in neurodivergence as well. So these kinds of things are fantastic, but definitely for me, when I was younger, it was definitely very much the message in the early 90s that it was wrong to be too sensitive, using air quotes there, and that any of these little things that we supposedly picked up on, they weren't in fact there. And when you repeatedly told that you're wrong, then that can erode your self-esteem. And so in order to feel safe and secure, your priority becomes fitting in with everybody
Yeah.
else and
Yeah.
doing what you're told, doing what you're expected.
Yeah.
And that can also include taking on those feelings of others because you want them to be happy. You can feel that they're unhappy, and so you're trying to appease that. So you're basically compromising your own inner peace for the outer peace of everybody else.
Like people
Um,
pleasing kind of
yeah,
behaviors. So you mentioned
essentially.
neurodivergence. Do you think
Mhm.
that affects people being or makes them more likely to be a sensitive person? Are those related in any way?
I think it's a very complicated area, and lots more research needs to be done in this area, but I personally believe that there is a link. I don't think it necessarily means that if you're highly sensitive that you are neurodivergent, but I'm open to evidence that suggests otherwise. I think there's a lot of talk out there about how it actually means that if you're highly sensitive, that you have autism. And I don't know if that I actually fits together all the pieces. So I think that's just one theory out there that I don't currently align with. And it's it's definitely the case that a lot of people who are neurodivergent are highly sensitive. That is
Well,
what I
and women
believe.
are like significantly underdiagnosed
Underdiagnosed,
because we
yes.
present so different. Well, I shouldn't say significantly, but in the past we've been very underdiagnosed because we present differently as in childhood. Like our like
Mhm.
being on the spectrum shows up differently for women, for what from what I've read and tried to understand about my own brain.
Absolutely, yes. So I think that for young girls, they typically present more with inattentive symptoms of ADHD than hyperactive, and that can lead to it going under the radar.
Hmm.
And for years, my own experience with ADHD symptoms did, in fact, go under the radar. I was late diagnosed, and yet I did have symptoms of ADHD looking back.
Oh yeah, I got diagnosed in my 40s
Hmm.
because perimenopause brought it out so bad. But I've
Yeah.
been a nurse, so you can function very well with ADHD as a nurse. It's like the perfect job. So I didn't need to be diagnosed. I was not having any
Yeah.
issues. It was fine till perimenopause hit, and I was like, "Whoa, help!"
Yes, it's
So interesting.
fascinating how
Yeah.
the change in hormones can actually affect how it presents.
Yeah, yeah. And then I started learning about it, looking back at my childhood, like I'm like, oh, this it so fits. A lot of it fits. Like I used to get in trouble for like talking all the time in class and stuff like that. Just things like women show up a little differently. So very interesting to say. So I love this conversation, but I also want to get kind of a little more into like some of like the binge eating and body dysmorphia. So, would you say that that is related to the to being more sensitive? These issues are more prevalent in people who are sensitive?
I would say that that's how it presents to me.
Okay.
So when you think about body dysmorphia and how what it essentially presents as is a condition where your perception of how others perceive you is distorted. And the way that this seems to occur, in my experience, is that you're taking on everybody else's beliefs about how we're meant to look,
Mm-hmm.
how we're meant to fit into society. There's all
Mm-hmm.
of these external expectations of how much weight we should carry, uh, how our face should look, what
Mm-hmm.
even,
Our skin color, our
yes,
tone, like yeah, everything.
absolutely.
There's an ideal image, but there's an ideal woman for like every decade or culture, whatever is the popular thing or the look that everyone's trying to meet, right?
Absolutely, yes. And you're right, it changes and it's arbitrary.
Yeah.
And so I think the best way to explain this would be, to reflect on my own story is that when I was younger, I actually didn't really have any problems with how I looked when I looked in the mirror. And when I hit puberty, I looked in the mirror and I thought, okay, I'm good with this?
Yeah.
And then I went out into the world and I was told, you're too fat, you're not pretty enough. And getting these messages, there were countless other messages. I also started to develop cystic acne, which really affected my confidence because people would point that out. And so all of this kind of thing, it can actually really erode your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're already highly sensitive, your nervous system might be more susceptible to dysregulation, and therefore you're just trying to keep yourself safe. So, as a safety mechanism, what can then happen, this was the case for me, is that ultimately I took on what other people were saying about me,
Mm-hmm.
and I used that to keep myself safe. So I would filter what I saw in the mirror through the lens of all of these different criticisms. And
Mm-hmm.
this started to affect how I perceived myself until it got to the point where, even though I was a what you would class medically as an average, like a regular weight, I actually saw that I was medically overweight and that it was a problem and that it was unacceptable, basically. This is how I'd started to perceive myself. And so I began to see myself as this really ugly person. And I just think it's really interesting when I look back at how I was okay with how I looked until I started taking on what everybody else was saying. And then it became a mechanism to keep me safe. And as you were also asking me about binge eating disorder, I'll go there as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, with regards to binge eating disorder, I think you can be more susceptible to it if you're highly sensitive. I believe there's evidence that does link ADHD and binge eating, and that's often to do with
Interesting.
impulse control and dopamine seeking behaviors and lots of other things, really. But when you're highly sensitive, you don't necessarily know how to deal with the overwhelm, the overstimulation. And so you might develop coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily of best service to you. And for me, that was binge eating. It started off as disordered eating. So I had a very difficult relationship with food as I went into my teens from all of the different avenues of media and just people talking at school and that kind of thing, and I felt that there was a specific way that I had to look and there was a specific way to do it, and that was dieting. And so I started to become very controlled about what I was eating, very controlled about my weight. I got to the point where I was getting on the scales multiple times a day. I just became obsessed with it because it was almost like I was checking to see if I was good enough yet. And that for me was really uh, damaging because I didn't realize what I was creating for myself. I was self-perpetuating with this idea of not being good enough, which is something that I had carried around with me. And it took a long time for me to actually see that actually, yes, I am good enough exactly as I am, because it does take a lot of consistent effort being consciously aware of how you're talking to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a lot of time to actually unravel that. But the binge eating behavior was absolutely a way of me trying to gain some kind of emotional regulation. And I remember there were times when I was just so overwhelmed with emotions that I would actually be eating and eating and eating, even though I was physically in pain. I had stomach ache from the volume of the food that I was eating, but I just couldn't seem to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And because, nobody actually really tells you that the kinds of foods that we tend to binge on actually help to feed that cycle, for want of a better word there, but maybe it's very appropriate, but it does feed the cycle because of how the product is created. It's is designed to make you want to eat more of it, because why would a company sell a product that people don't want to eat,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So I would blame myself, and
Mhm.
that would cause more of the same behavior,
Yeah,
because
like
I would then become
shame
more
and
overwhelmed.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's just compounding. So how do you help women to escape that? How do you help women get out of that cycle? What's the key there?
Okay, so there are several keys, and I think really what it starts with is acknowledging that your voice is valuable, your own inner voice is valuable, and reconnecting with that. Because we spend so much time and energy listening to the diet industry. This is, you know, the diet that we should be doing. These are the diet products that we should be having. We spend so much time listening to the media saying this is how you should look and this is what you should be doing. And we've been conditioned to do this because we believed that it wasn't safe to trust ourselves when we were younger, because we were told that we were wrong. And when we actually start to reconnect with ourselves, then that's when we can start to trust ourselves again, because this mistrust of the self is a huge piece of why highly sensitive women struggle with the bathroom scales, why um they struggle for a way forward of releasing not only the physical weight, but all of the other heaviness that comes with these expectations, the need to be perfect.
Hmm.
And yes, a part of that is what we're putting into our bodies. So when we just continue the eating habits that we normally go about with, and we're reconnecting with ourselves, yes, it's really great that we are making that effort to reconnect with ourselves. But what we tend to encounter is a very confused internal system,
Hmm.
because we're not used to trusting ourselves, and because what we've been putting into our bodies often has just thrown our system out of whack. It's disrupted the hormones, it's disrupted the signals. And so this is why when you turn to an approach such as intuitive eating, because you throw your hands up in the air and say, I'm done with this whole dieting thing, you turn to intuitive eating, what can happen is you just get really confused, because you're listening to your body, but your body wants chocolate, or your body wants, whatever your favorite food is that you feel like you might overindulge on.
Hmm.
And that's because all of the signals are misfiring, your body's really confused. And so what then needs to be looked at is, what are we feeding our bodies on a daily basis that's confusing these signals? And how can we go about changing this in a gentle and compassionate way? Not doing it from a point of, right, we're going to overhaul this because it needs
Hmm.
to go. That can actually be really detrimental, because again, it's making you wrong, and it's making you feel like you're not safe. And
Increases shame, right? Like shame is like the enemy of everything, right? You can't, if you're shaming yourself, you're not gonna win.
Absolutely. Yes, because it just self-perpetuates. The more you shame yourself, the more you feel ashamed. And then,
Yeah. And that's what we're feeding. That's what we're like trying to hide or mask or
yeah,
not feel. Yeah.
absolutely. Yes. And so it's really important to not only look at the inner game, but what we're actually putting into our bodies as well. And we can do this in a way that isn't about pushing, that isn't about being at war with ourselves. It's about realizing that our body's doing the best that it can with what it's being given. And ultimately, you're on the same side. Your body
Like
is just
compassion, having a little
exactly,
compassion for yourself and your body and why you're
absolutely,
doing this and what you're trying to fix. I love that. I think that's what we all need, right? Just to give ourselves a little break. Like stop beating up on
absolutely,
ourselves so much.
absolutely. Yes, that self-compassion is so important.
I love that. I love that. So when if listeners are listening at home and they're like, this is me, how do I get started? What kind of tips would you give them, like at home, or where to look, or what the first step would be? Because I'm imagining this is a very overwhelming thing. And for people, they've probably struggled for a long, long time. I know now I've gotten to a good place since I've healed, but like when I was younger, I struggled. I wouldn't say it was enough to be diagnosed as binge eating, but I have ADHD pretty bad, which was diagnosed later in life. We talked about that a little bit before we started recording, but I definitely struggled with binge eating on and off when I was younger. And it would always be in like times of emotional turmoil where I would do something very similar. I would like eat until the point I was so uncomfortable. And then I would hate myself. I would hate myself
Mhm.
because I knew what I just did and how I felt. And then I would have to purge it. Like, because that was the only thing that made me feel better. And it wasn't like a
Yeah,
consistent thing all the time where like, but it was definitely something that when I got overwhelmed that would happen. It hasn't happened now in a while because I feel like I've gotten to a good place, but I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, maybe low key, that maybe don't ever talk about it or are not enough to be diagnosed, you know? So
yeah.
what advice would you give people at home to kind of like cut that shame cycle and where to start?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that so
Yeah,
candidly. And I think a lot of people resonate with that story.
I do too,
Um,
actually. Like a lot more than, I mean, I think a lot of people probably will never tell anybody, but I think a lot of
mhm.
people struggle with a lot of women struggle with these issues.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I would like to say that if you do think that you have body dysmorphia or binge eating disorder, then it is something that you do need to speak to your doctor or therapist about because it's a delicate situation that needs
Hmm.
addressing holistically.
Hmm.
So it's definitely important that this is addressed in um, a way that is supported by medical professionals.
Right.
So that's very, very important. However, if you're at home and you're thinking to yourself, this really resonates with me because I feel like what I see when I look in the mirror might actually be a distortion. Like I'm realizing that now, and that I really do struggle with emotional eating,
Hmm.
then I think the first step to take is to actually just freaking acknowledge yourself for all that.
Hmm.
Because if you don't acknowledge it,
You can't
then
deal with it.
exactly, yes. And I think it's incredible if you've actually got that self-awareness where you can identify it.
It's
That's
scary though, I think, for a
fantastic.
lot of people, really scary to like sit there and be honest about it, right? It's
Yeah,
a big step. I love that though. It's great advice.
it is. It can be really, really challenging to actually just sit with that and be like, okay, so this is what I'm actually facing, and to be really compassionate with yourself and also to look for patterns.
Mm.
So this is one way that you can reconnect with yourself is to look at every time you look in the mirror and you have a particular thought that's recurring. What is it that's been going on for you when you actually have that thought?
Oh, so
And
kind of taking an inventory of like the days I'm really seeing an image that is not real, I'm really feeling this, then taking note of what else is going on in your life to kind of create some patterns. I love that. That's a great idea.
absolutely. And similarly with food habits as well.
Ooh, like what you're
So,
eating, what you're turning to with certain
yeah,
things. That's great.
absolutely.
That's great. I've had this conversation with some of my close friends, but and you know, it's not like backed by anything, but like that certain emotions actually elicit, you know, like if I'm struggling in my intimate relationship, I may want more food or I may not want to eat at all. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's the emotion sometimes, like what, am I feeling hurt? Am I feeling betrayed? Am I feeling not good enough? And how I react, because some of those I will not want to eat at all, and then other ones it's like
Yeah,
that's my comfort. I need to like eat sugary, fatty things that make me feel good in the moment and terrible later. So it's different. So I love that you put like maybe paying attention to yourself, learning your patterns. It's great.
absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you work with women in this capacity? I know you do some one-on-one coaching.
Mhm. Yes, that's right. So it's generally one-to-one coaching sessions, as you say, that are a container for us to explore eating habits, but not in a way that's about overhauling things. So what we want to do is just look at it from a point of curiosity rather than judgment and see what incremental shifts that we can make in eating habits in order to start reconnecting to ourselves by helping to regulate the hormones and the signals that are going on in our bodies so that we're actually truly understanding, whether we're really hungry. And, it's okay if we are really hungry. And then we want to look at how we can use food as a tool to actually help with regulating our emotions in a way that's of service to us, not in a way that's undermining all our efforts. So
Mm,
the main thing for that is blood sugar regulation, because
mm-hmm,
when our blood sugar is out of balance, that actually affects the nervous system and how well regulated it is. And as we've previously talked about, if we're dysregulated, then that can cause that feeling of not being safe, being afraid,
mm-hmm,
which is then, it puts us in a position of how do we cope with this? And then potentially falling back on default coping mechanisms. So that is the the first point of call in terms of the physical is blood sugar management. And then we really go from there about looking at ways that we can help support the releasing of weight, whether that is just the physical weight, but more often than not, it's the other weight that we carry, the invisible weight that we carry, which is all of those expectations. So a lot of clients that come to me, they don't realize actually that it wasn't really about the weight until they're working with me. They realize that it's about all of the expectations that they're putting on themselves and this almost compulsion to be perfect.
mm-hmm,
And once they realize that they don't need to be perfect because they're already good enough exactly as they are, that just takes off so much pressure. And it's through consistent work together that helps them to align with that belief. So to start with, it seems like a leap just to say, I'm already enough. And that's because it's almost like a cognitive dissonance that when we believe something so strongly, like I'm not good enough, to completely pivot 180 and believe completely the opposite, it just feels like too much of a stark contrast, and the mind will know essentially that it's being almost deceived. But if we do it in a gentle way where we're just like we're open to the possibility that actually maybe what we've been telling ourselves about not being good enough might not actually be true. And then we work at it from that perspective and gradually move towards, yes, I am enough. Because otherwise, again, it's all about overwhelm
Hmm.
when we turn everything upside down.
I love that. I love that. It's like it's these like internal, these small internal shifts that cause that like reverberate into these big external shifts that you're not expecting. It's like that stuff comes effortlessly when we can align
Hmm.
the more inner ways about how we feel about ourselves. The rest kind of
Yeah,
just falls into place. I love that. And I think
absolutely.
it's very true. It's just hard. It's hard to believe that and it's hard to get there. So I love
It
that.
can be challenging, yes, but it is definitely possible. And again, it's not about being perfect at it.
Yeah,
So
right.
I believe that I'm good enough, but am I perfect at that? No.
Mhm.
And that's okay.
You're human. We're flawed
Exactly.
creatures. I love that. So, I know you're in the UK, but do you work with people everywhere virtually? Is that, I'm assuming, like with like
Yes,
this, like a Zoom call?
I do. Yes. So I
Okay.
work virtually, occasionally in the physical, but my work's generally online. Yes.
Okay.
So it means I get to work with people all over the world in different time zones, which is fantastic. And actually, also, when you were asking me about how I work with people, the other thing that I do is energy alignment sessions. And
Mm.
this can actually work quite well because if we're not in the same time zone, it means that I can more easily work with them when they're resting or sleeping, which is something that I like to do. That's how I do it. So I take a look at, what's going on for them energetically and help them to release that. And the way that I do that is that receive this information when I'm doing an energy reading, and then I can actually bring that into the coaching. So this came up. And so I start
I love that.
asking questions about that and, whether it resonates. And therefore, uh, what can we do that's going to actually incorporate this into releasing all of that extra weight, invisible extra weight.
Yeah. Okay. So if someone is listening to this and they are interested in talking to you or using your services, how would they get a hold of you? Do you through your
So
Instagram or
mhm. Yes, absolutely. So Instagram is where I live to be. And if you would care to drop by, it's at Ellouise Heather. And I'm sure you can put a link for that in the show notes, if
I
that's
will.
okay.
Yep, 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 yep.
Thank
And the
you.
Eloise is with two L's, not one.
That's right. Yeah. Ellouise.
Yep, Eloise Heather. Love that.
And yeah, just come by, drop me a DM, and I would absolutely love to know if this resonated with you.
Yay. Okay. And then with all my guests, I ask them, what is your go-to self-care when things get overwhelming and you're feeling out of control? How do you bring it back to you, bring it back to center?
Okay, so there's a few things really. So, number one is movement. That is an absolute priority for me. Movement looks different for everyone though. So, I like to go out for walks in nature, and nature is another big element of the self-care for me. But I'm aware that, people at home might struggle with that. It depends on, your level of current physical ability. And so even if it's just deep breathing, because that in itself is still a movement, it still can create a shift. And I find that so, so powerful. And another thing that I like to incorporate for self-care is whenever I look in the mirror and I notice a change in myself because, time moves forward and there's
Mm-hmm.
always changes. And I look in the mirror and I notice something that wasn't there before, maybe like a blemish or fine line or something like that. And then I look at myself and I smile and I say, and that's okay.
I like that. That's great. Like, I'm accepting this. It is what it is. It's a gift to be able to age, right?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really enjoy your approach to this because I think, like I said, I don't know if I said this when we were recording or before, but this subject can turn a lot of women off. I think as we
Hmm.
age, we've been through so much of this. We've struggled with our
Yes.
weight or image for so long, and we're just kind of tired of this. And so I think the approaches that are more holistic, that center around self-acceptance and self-love, are the ones that are really needed, and it's hard to get, it's hard to believe in that. So I really appreciate your approach and your time explaining it, because I think it is very powerful. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your work with us. And yeah, if you guys are interested, it's at Ellouise Heather on Instagram. And yeah, well, hopefully you'll be back on the show soon when you have new updates, and we will talk to you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you. That's a wrap for this episode of Empowered Ease. I hope you were inspired by today's guest and felt empowered by their story. Our listeners have been growing, and I am so thankful. Welcome. You can aid in that growth by helping us by liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. I'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future guests and for how you are empowering others in your community. So until we meet again, keep challenging the norms and empowering those around you.